Welcome. My name is Sonal Sathe. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I will be sharing some early insights for thinking out loud, centering disabled voices in health information. For those who might have visual needs, I am a South Asian woman wearing a white tank top and a long black ponytail. I do not have glasses on at the moment because they will hurt. So without further ado, I am going to briefly introduce artificial intelligence and healthcare information and COVID-19 because my research ties these first two topics together before discussing more specifics about what I'm up to currently and what I hope will be the future direction for my work. So, what is AI anyway? The simple way to talk about AI is to think of it as a computer that's doing tasks that we normally associate with humans doing those tasks instead. In the case of chatbots, they're powered by AI, so they're pulling information and spitting out yet more information. It's been infused into society and used in healthcare itself. How, you may ask? How is because they're using it in medical imaging. They are also using it in automated processes to even call a doctor's office. Sometimes it's as simple as searching on Google or Bing or other search engines, because the first results we get are sometimes AI generated. It's used to spread healthcare-related information, in theory. But is this information accurate? Maybe, maybe not. We had the infodemic right around the time that COVID became the pandemic. Information inundated all of us, and not all of it was good because, as previously discussed, social media can be both a great and terrible beauty. What we need to find, though, is the fact that disabled voices are often completely shunted to the side or ignored, even. And so what we need to find out here is what the disabled experience of health information is. I also want to bring in a topic here about user experience. User experience is the experience of an end user of all aspects of an element of technology. In this case, this and healthcare intersect because disabled people are searching for healthcare information online. What are they finding? And are they using it to help make healthcare decisions? Are there caregivers? We don't know. That's what we need to find and report out. So most of us have heard of COVID by now. COVID-19, of course, is the disease caused by infection of the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. This can produce a lasting physical impact, and we know that people who already have disabilities are more susceptible to the lasting impacts that we tend to see from long COVID. Things like brain fog, chronic fatigue, loss of senses permanently, or sometimes irreparable organ damage. So we know that already. What we don't know is where is the gap in information seeking in real time, because people who recall things previously may or may not recall them accurately, and that goes for disabled and non-disabled alike. So what we need to know is what the impact is of this virus in the disability community, and more importantly, what their end user experience is of searching this information online in the search engines of their choice. And so what my research is, this is the tail end of a multi-part study. Previously, examining the history of disabilities with respect to technology and infectious disease and literature review is really just setting the backdrop. The survey that I released at the beginning of this particular arm of the study was to both disabled and non-disabled participants. The follow-up study is what I will be presenting today, because to find out the real-time information, what I'm really trying to get people to do with disabilities is to think aloud and verbalize what they're finding as they're finding it. Or some might call this a concurrent think aloud strategy. And so that's really what my research topic today is going to be about. And so why this developed? Because human-computer interaction researchers believe, a lot of people believe, that verbal reports from disabled people are reliable data. Their experience, our experience, is our reality. And because we know that non-disabled people don't need assistive technology, they just may or may not need it. They don't really need it, I guess. But disabled users definitely need it, and in some cases, they need it to survive. What we're trying to do is to capture these thoughts in real time. And so what I'm asking my participants to do is to follow a series of prompts. There are 4 prompts. The first is to search COVID-19 infection. The second is COVID-19 symptoms. The third is COVID-19 and a piece of misinformation called ivermectin. And the last, but not least, is COVID-19 vaccine. And so what we've gained from these early insights, so far, only 5 people have taken this. We're about to do participant number 6 later this week. However, what we're finding is that with everyone using Google, I'm not sure why, the first generated results from initial searches online for a COVID-19 infection and COVID-19 symptoms, they're almost always AI generated, claiming that they are from reputable sources. Sometimes they are and sometimes they are not. And the last 2 searches are yielding more articles and news links. And are these reputable articles? Research articles, yes. But the information is not always up to date. So some of these are published in 20 and 21, and they will probably not know that immediately unless they are searching for that date intentionally. The last one will yield more news links about the vaccine. And sometimes we're getting resources from outside the US. Some of the news sources are accurate and some maybe not. Did it depend on locale? Maybe, maybe not. All of our participants have to be living in the state of Virginia and are 18 or older. And that has still not necessarily influenced where we're getting the news articles, which is, I think, an interesting insight. And so what we're planning on doing with this, once we get more participants, we'll start coding in earnest. The challenges that people are finding with finding this information are called pain points from an HCI and user experience standpoint. And these pain points tend to manifest in accessibility, usability, and misinformation. These are going to have some subheadings underneath this, but what we know is that the inaccessibility and inusability, a lot of folks who've had ADHD as self-diagnosed or suspected or even confirmed from a medical professional, they tend to report a lot of distracting pop-ups, especially when they're trying to search information on the vaccine. Sometimes it's about where they're going to get it, and other times it's more about ads to advertise where to get the vaccine, but doesn't tell them about where they're going to, what the vaccine is going to have the impact on them. Maybe, maybe not. Usability of the information, again, whether it's within date or whether it's from 2020, which at this point is a few years old. The misinformation, of course, there have been expressed concerns that if I was just a layperson who didn't have any knowledge about this, I might read this and think that the vaccine is bad for me. It's good for you, for the most part, unless you literally can't get vaccines. And then what is planned is an inductive piece. So we're looking things about assessing the quality of the information that people are finding, and then some emotion, because for searching the misinformation on COVID-19 and ivermectin, this was distressing for at least one participant, because we know ivermectin does not work. And some people will still stand by it. It's a whole other ballgame. What do I hope that this research will do? I want this to inform patient-provider communication in healthcare, but more importantly, I want this to inform broader digital literacy initiatives. How are people processing this information, and how are they taking it in? Are they really taking it and integrating it into their daily lives to discuss with their loved ones? That is what I really hope to do. Dissemination and implementation is the way of spreading forth the good news. That's my fancy way of watering it down. And so one of the things that people will at least hope to do is to take the accurate information being the thing and put it out en masse to where it's most needed, because knowledge truly is power. And so I also want to thank all of you for being here. And if you would like, if you live in Virginia, you are at least 18 or older, please feel free to scan this and take the survey and then see if you're eligible for the follow-up study. And I will be very happy to reach out about a day and time. And I think that's all I have. And I'm happy to open the floor to questions because I see somebody is calling time.
Thank you so much, Sonal. Wonderful to be able to hear from you and to be able to share some of this wonderful, and also to be able to share if folks would like to join the study. We'd love that to happen as well, to support your research. Yes, want to welcome folks in the chat if you're willing to share any great questions for us. Sonal, I deeply appreciate you raising this topic, and I would love to hear how you have seen technologies change in recent years to adapt to disabled folks, and where we can better harness technology to honor our fullness as a community.
It is such an interesting question, and I'm really glad you asked it. So the first thing is how technology has changed. A lot of people are interested, especially in our current climate, of making new things to center certain people, whereas the people that really need to be centered are often ignored or worse, squashed. And so I think that it's a double-edged sword, right? So people, and I'm also reminded of Kranzberg's first law when it comes to science, technology, and society studies. Technology in and of itself is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral, but it exists. And my offshoot of of Kranzberg is we all need to decide how we're going to relate to it and through it to each other. Are we going to use the user feedback from the disability community? My greatest hope is that the answer to that is yes, but I'm also realistic when we consider today. So what we really need are harnessing our power in the community to not only participate in these studies, but have the researchers and even just regular industry folks who are willing to identify that they have disabilities and be able to lead the charge and put this as feedback for the people for whom it matters the most. And I think that it's a slow going process, but I also think it's important. I also don't think that we should give up entirely because that is what people in power today might want. And I don't think this is limited to the United States. I think this is a worldwide issue. Protectionism is on the rise. And one of the critical things about technology is that it tends to also serve as either a protectionist force, or really encourage openness. It all depends on the end users on both ends of the line.
That's incredible. Sonal, I really appreciate you sharing that. We have another question in the chat as well. Building off your significant work, a question arises. Wouldn't using AI in healthcare result in errors as well? Even though it's maybe not generative AI in the same way, isn't the concept of false output still relevant?
Yes, it is relevant. So the question centered around whether AI in healthcare is a good idea, pretty much is what I was hearing from that question. And I say not as its current state. And I think I would issue a word of caution to computational biologists, especially who are using it for medical imaging, because the worst thing you can do is to give somebody treatment they don't need or not give somebody treatment that they do need. You got stage 4 cancer. Yeah, that's kind of a big deal. So I say that think before you act with respect to using AI in healthcare, because those images may or may not be accurate, and automating those processes if you've ever been on the other end of a phone call with the doctor, I think we all have, and encountered the level of frustration when we get an AI powered chatbot. No, I need a real live person. So don't just assume that AI powered tools and personas are going to take the place of human beings. I don't think we're quite at the point of overtaking and pushing away for the vanilla meets sack legion just yet. And I'm not sure if there's a sign for that.
May or may not. So no, I just wanted to also follow up. There another person had private message asking if you could share the link to your survey so that they can maybe participate if that's something you're able
Sure.
to do, or we can do afterwards if need be.
I think would probably a good idea for me to share afterwards, just because, yeah, technology on my end is being
That
interesting.
perfectly okay. I just want to make sure the request was made. Building off of what you just shared about some of the hesitations around AI. Just curious how you have seen this operate, not just within your study, but even more writ large, operate in positive ways for folks to be able to see some benefit from that technology.
So I think that one way that AI has been used for positive things is a Nature article that was published a couple years ago, and I think this was 2021. And it's interesting you mentioned this because this was in a thread where I'm a huge trivia nerd and I follow Jeopardy pretty closely. So we had one person who recently had gone on the show and won a fair amount of money, and somebody had asked him a similar question. And he had said, I work on AI and I feel like this is a horrible thing. And so I decided to jump in and say, well, at the same time, it can be used for terrible things. But one thing that they've used, which is published in Nature, is that they've used it to predict protein folding, which can produce a lot of good as far as potentially making one vaccine to not necessarily rule them all, but rule most of flu infections, and perhaps they wouldn't need so many COVID shots in the same, strain of things, so you wouldn't have to go get a new one every single time a strain popped up. So that is a possible good use of artificial intelligence as far as healthcare information. We also think that, it can seem like a small thing and an insignificant thing, but think about the way that proteins show up. Amino acids are one of the essential building blocks for life, human life and non-human life as well. Okay, I'm glad someone linked that. I can't see it, but
I was about to let you know that one of our attendees, Paloma, also shared the link to the QR code for the slide. So thank you for a teamwork for this effort.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Paloma.
So Sonal, I would love to hear, we have a little bit of time, and so certainly invite some more questions if folks have them in the chat. But I'd love to hear, as you're navigating even your own identities and your own work around this, obviously this is an academic work, but it's also very personal work. And so I'd love to hear how you've been navigating that for yourself. What are some things that maybe have come up for you? And, whatever you're willing to share for the audience to just kind of, for themselves, kind of gentleness and care as they do the same for themselves.
When one participant said that if he had used if they had used their screen to text, or screen reader, I should say, and then speech to text or voice to speech functions that were embedded in their computer, it would have made things twice as long for him to get through. I'm hoping I'm getting their pronouns right. I'm so sorry. And so I just felt really validated because I knew I was not the only one encountering this issue. But I also wonder if there is all this HCI literature on blind and visually impaired and all these things that we encounter issues with, and there is only just now a movement to start co-designing stuff with us that's related to AI. I wonder how long it's going to take to catch on. The other thing I've noticed with the early literature searches is that it was a lot easier to find co-designing, collaborative, and collective efforts in South and Southeast Asia than it was in the United States and the Americas, because there's just more of a collectivist mentality over there. And in the US, it's still very much the neoliberal capitalistic model, which I think might not necessarily be the best impetus to push for co-designing unless you really operationalize into, this is your return on investment. Do people in other countries have that mentality? Yeah, absolutely. But is it the prevailing mentality? Probably not.
So no, you also, as you're discussing all of this around the kind of socio-political scene, how this is obviously operating in the United States, maybe differently than in South Asia, as you're thinking about this for the years to come, right? This is done in a very timely place and time for us. What are some things that you would think to suggest for folks as they're navigating not just technology, but navigating the socio-political climate? How would they do so differently now that we're in this phase of folks really questioning all data and information?
It's a tricky one, right? So I would first say that this starts with family members. I understand that can be hard. But I think having the hard conversations at home is where I think we tend to have the most influence, because if there is such a push to really have the emphasis on family, well, family should be informed about what it's like for people with disabilities too. May hurt to hear it, but learning and conflict are one and the same, and without conflict, there can be no growth. So I think that that's the starting point. The next is that I think we need to think about who's in office, and at least in the United States, we need to think about that within the next year or so, because we know what's at stake, we know it's under attack, and those of us who vote with thinking about the future should probably reach out to those who might be not even just one persuasion or the other, but on the fence. I think that there is a lot to be said about people who don't vote. And this is coming from somebody who, my father never voted. It was a sticking point in our household. But I think that the challenges are to get people who might be on the fence or disillusioned with the political scene to get out and participate, even if just locally, because that is where I think we have the most impact and the most say. This is long before we even get to the national level. A lot of people just want to say, oh, I give up, Trump's in power, and that's understandable. But at the same time, we know that his life is finite. Everyone's life is finite, and we in the disability community know that more intimately than anyone else. To dance with death is a form of disability intimacy.
That is incredibly powerful. And I just appreciate you naming the truths that for a lot of folks, as they've disillusioned around national politics, that the local can be very personal. And so whether it is family members, whether it is local politicians or boards or other kind of policies and laws that impact them directly, to try and invest that, as difficult as it might be, to be able to provide access to others in their community. We did have somebody in the chat that shared patients for patient safety are looking for input on the benefits and disadvantages of AI utilization in healthcare, just in case you didn't see that yet.
And I really appreciate is this I can't see the participant name.
Is Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that. I might go ahead and look that up as well.
Wonderful. Yes, all of our resources should be available soon thereafter, after our presentation. Are there any final thoughts? We're kind of coming close to the last couple of minutes of our time, but I wanted to give you some final words if you wanted to share that with the audience. Or not, if that's okay. Whatever you have that brings to your heart.
I think my only final thought is one thing that I found interesting is that a lot of the folks who chose to identify what specifically their disabilities were, some did have multiple physical disabilities, and the ADHD and autism folks were pretty open about it.
Yes.
A lot of the folks who marked they had mental health disabilities did not aim to participate in the second part of the study, which I understood and was expected because there's just still a lot of stigma around mental health diagnoses, and especially depending on what it is. But it does make for a future opportunity for folks working in that area to really examine research participant engagement in a qualitative aspect.
Yeah. I'm hearing in that last statement an invitation for audience members or folks that see this recording afterwards. More studies yet to happen for those that specialize in this work. And so grateful for you. So now thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your energy, your talents in all of this. And for all of you as attendees, thank you so much for being present with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me, and thank you all for coming.